up, everybody? How y'all doing today? Just making my salad real quick. I hope y'all are doing well. It's a pretty nice day here in New York. A little bit of a breeze, but it feels nice. You might hear some cars behind me. I'm out front of McDonald's. I just got my Diet Coke. You know how I love that. And I'm fixing on my salad here before we get into it. I'll get this all stirred up. Say grace real quick. Oh God, thank you for the drinks, food you provided. Please bless it to my body is your service. Love you, God, thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, I thought we'd talk about pros and cons. Okay? Yeah, sorry if you hear the cars and car radios behind me. I don't got control over that. Yeah, I thought we'd talk about pros and cons. Like pros and cons of being a GM and pros and cons of being a player. Because why not? Why don't we start with pros and cons of being a GM, a game master for a role-playing game. Doesn't really matter what role-playing game. You know, if you play D&D or Pathfinder or Numenera or any other kind of role-playing game, Cyberpunk, whatever it may be. The general pros and cons are going to be pretty much the same. So, what are the pros of being a game master? What's the pros of being a GM for a role-playing game? Well, there's several of them. One is, you get to craft at least the start. At least at the start, you get to craft the world and kind of the starting adventure and maybe the kind of long-term, arc of the campaign. Like the players are going to drive things forward and they're going to go places and that may not have been where you would have took it, but that's where they took it. You know what I mean? But as a GM, you kind of get to craft this world that the players get to play in, And if you're a GM, that's something that you love. Now, that's if you're, building your own world. But maybe you use a pre-made setting for your role-playing game. That's cool. Maybe you just love that setting. Maybe you're not so interested in building a world for the players to play in, but you really love this world that already exists, and you want to run it for your players and have them play in that. And that gets you all, jazzed up, and you just love crafting that world or running that world for them. And they get to play in it. And that's something that you love to do. Awesome. You get enjoyment from that. Maybe you have this like grand story arc of where the game's gonna head long term. You know what I mean? And it brings you joy, seeing them move towards that big boss battle, that big boss fight, that world-changing, dimension-altering, all life is on the line moment. You know what I mean? That you have in your mind. And it comes up and it happens and it's climactic and it's awesome. Maybe you get joy from that. You know what I mean? Maybe it's that nobody else would be the GM, so you kind of got stuck doing it, but you're A-okay with that because you just want to get your friends together and get around the game table and have some snacks and some food that you probably shouldn't, and just have a great time with your friends. Maybe you're the one that's just facilitating that. Hey, what's up? Um, and so that's why you do it. Awesome, awesome. That's a pro. That's a pro to being a GM. Um, Another thing is like the GM is always on, right? He or she is always on. They're always playing the game. Like you're not waiting really for your turn to come around. You know, you're running the NPCs, you're running the world, you're running the monsters. You're always on. You know what I mean? Even when the players are taking their turn and they're doing their thing, you're behind the screen like thinking up, okay, this is the next step, 2, 3, 4 steps down the line. Like you're always on. You know what I mean? And for me, that's a pro for me because I for some like my attention span is just nothing anymore. I don't know. Internet has ruined me or something because you know it is hard for me to sit and just wait for my turn to come around. You know what I mean? So when I GM, you know what I mean, I'm always on. I'm always, you know, I'm doing a character voice, or or I'm figuring out what they're gonna say next, or how I'm gonna get this information to the players through some kind of cool means. Maybe they find it like scrawled on a wall in the sewer or something like that. But I want them to have this information. Um, you know what I mean? I'm always doing something behind that screen, so I'm always on. And that works well for me. Um, but some cons of being the DM, well, DM and GM running the game. You know, some of the cons are, you know, you're going to have to prepare. You got to prep. And prep, depending upon how you prep and what game, it could take a while. You know what I mean? I mean, some people do pretty limited prep and they can fill in the spots, improv, you know, the gaps. And that's great if you can do that. I like to improv a lot. But some people, they like it more written out. And those people are going to have to spend more time in prep. Oh, fuzzy right on my nose, dude. Anyway, that was funny. Yeah, so like, if you're improv heavy, maybe you only need to prep like 20, 30 minutes. But if you're the type that needs it in front of you, needs it more written out, then you know your prep can go an hour or more. You dig what I'm saying? What's up to everybody in the chat? Hope you all are having a good day. We're talking about the pros and cons of being a GM. You know, another con of being a GM is like you got to find that balance between challenging your players and not being like their adversary. You know, you're not trying to win the game. You're not trying to beat them up. You know what I'm saying? But you're also trying to challenge them. You're throwing that big boss at them, and the big boss is using their powers. You know, you don't want to pull too many punches. You know what I mean? Because then the game gets too easy and it gets boring. You dig what I'm saying? At the same time, you don't want to TPK like every single game because you know it's me versus the players and I win. So you got to find that balance. Dig what I'm saying? You know, another thing is people look at the GM when there's a problem amongst people in the group. Like player A isn't getting along with player B. And people look at the GM to try to mediate and solve that issue. You know what I mean? And you know, I get it. You kind of looked at as the leader and the facilitator. But I'm saying just know this going in. You know what I mean? That you might have to handle some interpersonal conflicts. You know, you're probably going to be the one scheduling the games as well, trying to work around all the people's schedules and stuff. But, man, once you run a game, whether you think it went well or not, if your players are like jazzed, oh man, I had fun, you know, and they're talking about it like, oh man, this NPC said this and blah blah blah, and oh man, that went crazy right there. Oh man, you said that funny thing right at the right moment, you know, and yo, that feels so good for a GM. You know what I mean? So nice. Somebody in the chat doing crazy stuff. Guess what? I don't care. So anyway, next is players. Like, let's talk about the pros of being a player. Well, players obviously, they don't have to do the prep that a DM has to do. Oh no, my stuff. It's starting to get a little breezy out. I'll have to get that in just a second. Hold on while I get that. Okay. I don't want to leave my trash laying around. It's not right. Not cool. Don't be a fool. Yeah, players don't have to do the prep that the GM has to. You know, they don't gotta prep a game for hours. Now, to be honest though, a player should do like 10 minutes of prep, I think. Because my last game that I played in, I was unprepared, and I was the player. I forgot we had leveled up. You know, if I was a good player, I would have like looked back over my notes, would have got with my DM and GM, said, hey, did we level last time? That way I could have made sure I was ready for the game. Instead, I log on for the game because we play online, you know, and he's like, did everybody level? Oh shoot, no I didn't. So they had to wait a few minutes while I picked a few things, you know what I mean? So players don't have to do as much prep. They should do a little bit though. So another thing about being a player is you only have to control your character. You don't have to be in charge of all these enemies and all these NPCs and the cattle and the wildlife and all the monsters and all this. You're not in charge of any of that. You're just in charge of the one character. The guy on your character sheet, lady on your character sheet. That's who you're in charge of. You know what I mean? The salad is killer. Also, as a player, You're like the hero of the story. You know what I mean? You're you're the one that's like, you know, uncovering the evil plot, or rescuing the village from the dragon and stuff. Like you're the one that they're gonna write songs about. The bards are gonna sing your tales. Oh man, got a giant chunk of apple right there in my salad. And you get to try out these cool different character builds. I don't know. To me, that's pretty cool, especially when they come out, with like an expansion or something. You get the expansion and you get to make a new character using the new, classes or the new gear or whatever. What's the cons of being a player? Well, kind of like what I said before. If you're like me, and you're a type of person that has to always be on, always have to have your attention on something, being a player might be a little tough because you gotta wait. Like if you're in combat, at least, you gotta wait for the turn order to come back around to you before you can like really do anything. So, like, you don't want to get distracted. You don't want to get on your phone or anything, because that takes away from other people's fun at the game, and the DM sees that and stuff. And I'm guilty of that, you know what I mean? Getting on my phone. I shouldn't have done that. You know what I mean? And it takes away from other people's fun. But if you're a player, you're going to have to get used to, waiting for the turn order to come around to you. So it is a little bit of a slower type vibe than being a GM. I mean, it helps to be thinking, okay, my party member is doing this thing, I can do this next, or maybe I can set them up to do this or that. Ignore the bot. Yeah, I know. It's all right. In the chat it says, warning, permanent ban will ensure if live video does not end within 5 minutes. Yeah, that's obviously a bot. It's fake. My heart don't pump no fear, so even if it was real, I'm good. Whatever. But it's fake. But cons for being a player too. You don't get. Thank you for the encouragement. Like, you get a say in what games you play in, obviously, you know what I mean? But you don't craft the world. You play in somebody else's world. So as long as you're cool with that, that's awesome. But if you're a type of person that wants to craft your own world, then you're probably better off being the GM than you are being the player. You dig what I'm saying? So, as for which one is right for you, you think on it. You know what I mean? Do you want to craft a world or run a world for people to play in, then you're probably, better suited to be a GM. If you want to play in a world and you want to be like the hero of the story, then you'd be better as a player. You dig what I'm saying? And if you say, hey, I like both of those. Both of those sound like fun. You know what I mean? I want to run a world and have people playing it, and seeing them have fun makes me have fun. And also, there's sometimes I want to be the hero of the story. Guess what? That means that you should play sometimes. You should play sometimes, and you should GM sometimes. And that's awesome because, some GMs, they're like, they hold on white knuckle to the game. Like, this is my game. But as for me, I know for me, I don't know about anybody else, but as for me, I like the idea of multiple GMs or being able to share the GM job. Like, hey, I'll run for like a month or two, then you run for like a month or two, and then you run for a month or two, or whatever. Because especially if you're writing your own adventures and stuff, because it's just a lot on one person to write a fresh adventure every week or every other week. If they're a grown adult with a full-time job, wife, family, and all that, or husband and family, not saying all GMs are dudes and stuff. So yeah, I like the idea of multiple GMs in one group, or maybe you run, Cyberpunk for like 2-3 months, and then they run, maybe Cypher System for 2 or 3 months, and then they run, whatever for 2 to 3 months. You know what I mean? And then that way everybody kind of gets to feel what it's like to be the GM and gets to feel what it's like to be a player. Because when I started role-playing again, I took a long hiatus, like 8 to 10 years off from role-playing. And when I came back, I jumped right into being a GM. And I'm running the game, and I'm always on, having all this stuff behind the screen that I'm thinking about, and rolling and running the NPCs and doing voices. There's a dag running them there hills out on Saints, and doing all of that. When I finally played the game, then I realized, oh man, there is a lot of time between turns. Oh man, there's a lot of time here. This is a way I could speed up the game, and this is a way I could speed up the turns and stuff, and just make the game more enjoyable for my players. Like, I had to play and get the player experience, and it made me a better GM, because then I saw where I could make tweaks. You dig what I'm saying? And also, being a player and then GMing some, and then going back to being a player, then you get into your GM's head, and you work with him a little bit more, because you see what he's trying to do and trying to set up, and you're like, man, I could go left, but I know that he really wants me to go right. So you know what? I'm going to go right. You know what I mean? Because I know he's got more prepared if I go right or whatever. Just a little more sympathetic to the GM struggles. You dig what I'm saying? Anyway, just wanted to hop on here, talk about the pros and cons of being a GM, pros and cons of being a player. That's obviously not all of them. That's just the ones that have been on my mind, kind of marinating, you know what I mean, on the GM grill, GM player grill, role-playing, the grill of role-playing. That's what we're doing for the metaphor. Wow, that was terrible. Terrible. Anyway, I hope you all have a great day. Thank you for hanging out with me on my lunch break. We ate another salad, apple walnut salad. It was delicious. Had my Diet Coke, trying to lose this weight. Hey, it's the weekend's approaching, right? Or no, we're in the weekend. Oh man, I don't even know what day it is. It's Saturday, right? Yeah, Saturday. So I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Have a blessed weekend. And y'all know the line, man. Grab some friends and roll some dice, bruh. How do I end this thing?